How you doing? This is Fad MB64 with another console review. This time it's a 16-bit console. It's not the Super Nintendo. It's the Sega Genesis. This console came out in 1989, a few years before the Super Nintendo. And this is the Model 1 high-definition graphics model, if anyone of you are wondering. The Sega Genesis was called the Mega Drive outside of North America due to someone already having its name. Anyway, let's take a look at the top of it. This is a 16-bit it's a 16-bit Sega Genesis high-definition graphics. You have your cartridge port top loading, which means like I said, if it breaks, it can be easily repaired. You have your on and off switch, your reset button. Unfortunately, mine doesn't work, and your volume control. This was useful when you wanted to use stereo sound. On the front, you have two controller ports. Now these have the same pin connectors as an Atari 26, ColecoVision, Commodore 64, and etc., which means you can use the same pin connectors for the same controllers that have the same pin connectors. And also you have your headphone jack or stereo jack if you want to use stereo sound. On the side, we have some vents, same as the top. It's crazy, isn't it? On the back, you have all this crap you don't know what to do. Let me run down. This is the AC adapter in. Now this is important. You want to use the AC adapter that comes with the Sega Genesis Model 1. If you use the one that comes with the Model 2, a ghost will appear while you sleep saying you shouldn't have done that. I'm just kidding. It'll just fuse. It may cause a fuse or break your Genesis. Anyway, you have your AV in, your RF AV out, RF out, your channel 3 and 4 switch, which is indented for some reason, and your external port, which was used for almost nothing. And then you have this, which is a screw for the power base converter, I believe. On the side, it may look like nothing, but if you turn to the back, you can see that it's actually an expansion port for the Sega CD. As you can see, this motherboard right here indicates this for the Sega CD. Just put this back on. And you also have your FCC ID, Sega Genesis, and like it says down here, if you can't read it, it says Genesis AC use the 1602 Genesis AC adapter only. And it says if you need help, call this number, which will no longer help you anymore. You also have the little rubber feet, and this thing, I really don't know what it's for. And then, oh look, a screw. I wonder where that came from. Now let's talk about the controller. There are different models of these controllers. This is the 3-button with the red switches. This one is going to be my primary controller since all the buttons actually work. The one I have this is another 3-button with white buttons, and it's just so hard to push the buttons. It's so hard to push the buttons that you have to like jam it. Except the C button, that works pretty fine. You have your start, A, B, and C. It says Genesis. You also have your very comfortable D-pad, and you have your round edges. And note the plug is almost exactly the same one as the Atari 2600, except it says Sega on it. And you plug it right in here. So you're ready to play some games? That's all you have to do. Let's insert a game. Like example, in this case, we got Sonic the Hedgehog 2, the not for resale version. Like how it has its little end labels. And if you pop it on top of here and you press down, not so hard, turn it on, and you're ready to play. Now here's the hard part. If you want to get it out, you can't just use one hand. Well, I can, but this thing is pretty hard to get out, and it's pretty crazy. Ups and downs about the Sega Genesis. The Sega Genesis was a fair competitor to the Super Nintendo. but lost sales-wise. During the time where the Sega Genesis was already out, it came with a controller and a copy of Altered Beast, which is an early launch title for the Sega Genesis. And back in this time, it was competing with the NES, and it had a slogan, "Genesis does what Nintendo don't," and that really stirred up a competition. So when Nintendo released the Super Nintendo, they were looking for a mascot to compete with Mario. So they came up with, of course, Sonic the Hedgehog. And Sonic the Hedgehog was a very fast hedgehog who runs over loop-de-loops. Wait a second. Why am I giving you an introduction? And anyway, one of his best-selling games was Sonic the Hedgehog 2. And you can find Sonic the Hedgehog games anywhere in stores, even the classic ones. They're in these Ultimate Collections and other collectors spin-off types. The Sega Genesis, like I said before, the Sega Genesis was a fair competitor to the Super Nintendo. There were, I believe, 5 different versions. We have the high-definition graphics version, the one with no high-definition graphics on it, the Model 2, the Model 3, and the Nomad, which is another way of saying it travels everywhere, which makes it portable, but it looks like a giant brick. Have you seen it? Dang, that thing is huge. Anyway, back to what I was saying. One of the other reasons the Genesis was lost because of the add-ons it came out with. Even though Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis were competing to see who would get the first add-on, Nintendo was working with Sony, and they turned to Philips, and then Sony somehow created the PlayStation, and the Sega Genesis came up with their own add-on called the Sega CD, also known as the Mega CD outside of North America. And this enabled audio quality sound and more sprite movement. Now there were two models. One that stood on top of your Model 1, and it had a tray, and one stood on the side of your Model 2, and it had a top-loading door. The second add-on that was produced was 32X, as one calls it, the mushroom-shaped tumor. And this enabled the Genesis to use 32-bit cartridges. Sadly, those cartridges don't have end labels like this one. But it was still fine. It's just that people didn't want to pay another $100 or over $100 for all these new add-ons. But they enabled the Genesis to become more powerful and all. I am terribly sorry. That was my mother. She was asking if I did something, and I told her no. Anyway, once again, the Sega Genesis is a great console. I suggest you pick one up right now. It is. You can find them very cheap on eBay, I believe, and you can find a lot of them at old-fashioned game stores such as Play and Trade. Well, that's it for this review. The next review will be talking about gameplay for the Sega Genesis. This is Fat Alien Beast 64 saying thank you, and leave a comment, and have a wonderful day.